Wherever they came from, soldiers arriving on the Somme have a life of endurance and danger ahead of them. They're entering the land of the trench. It's so hard to visualise what this landscape would have looked like back in 1916. We do know there was a trench running just in front of me here. People think that they were long, thin and straight, but in fact they were zigzagged. That meant if a shell landed inside the trench, the blast could be contained to just a short section. Here the soldiers are making their way through just such a zigzag trench. No easy matter if you're carrying a rolled up stretcher like this soldier. This is a trench periscope, vital if you want to keep watch without getting your head blown off. The whole landscape is covered in these trenches, each one home to thousands of men. I've always been fascinated by the reality of life in those trenches. To find out more about them, I've come not to northern France, but to East Anglia. This is miserable.
Thoroughly.
Here on the outskirts of Ipswich, Taff Gillingham has painstakingly reconstructed a section of Western Front for use in movies and TV. Taff, it's hard to imagine guys kind of living down here for what, days on end, weeks on end, months? How long were they in these frontline trenches?
Well, it depended entirely on where you were, what the weather conditions were like. If it was quiet, you may be here anything up to 10 days. But sometimes if the weather conditions were really bad, in some places where the trenches were flooded, the army were wise enough to know that to keep them in their peak of fitness wouldn't survive it for more than a day. So then it might even be just 24 hours.
So on a day like this, freezing cold winter's day, you wouldn't be expected to do much more than a day or two in the front line, because then there was trenches further back with a bit more comfort.
I mean, basically, it was a four-part rotation. In a battalion, you would have the front line, the support line, the reserve line, and then out at rest. And obviously, the real pressure's in the front line. The front line trench obviously faces towards the German lines, and here we've got the fire step. This is the point of contact with the German army. So this is the frontline troops live here, eat here, sleep here. They're here all of the time.
Sleep on this step?
Yeah. There's no point in them being in dugouts, because if the Germans suddenly attack, the time it would take them to get out, by then the Germans have passed this trench on their way to the second line.
And I suppose sleeping on there is marginally better than down here, because it would have been so muddy and full of water.
Well, and also, don't forget that this still needs to be, troops still need to be moving past.
Much of the action takes place through the night, so many soldiers would sleep during the day. Just watch as these sleeping soldiers are suddenly awoken by their comrades, to much amusement. The dozing soldier is wearing a so-called Gore-Blimey cap. It has floppy sides and flaps to cover the ears in cold weather. This is an Irish regiment. It's just a few months after the Easter Rising, so the film is particularly lavish in its praise of the Irish. See this cooker cleverly dug into the side of a trench. Keeping the troops fed and provided with hot cups of tea is one of the most important things the army has to do. The food was generally regarded as being of pretty good quality. The army went to great lengths to make sure the guys in the front line got 3 hot meals a day. In fact, for some of the poorer recruits, that would have represented a step up from what they could expect at home. The trench wasn't only bedroom and kitchen, it was bathroom as well. To keep clean, soldiers are forced to improvise, even using helmets as basins. But cameraman Geoffrey Maylands has an additional challenge. He has to keep all his camera equipment clean and in working order. I've come to the Imperial War Museum in London to see for myself how the film was made. Is this the camera Maylands would have used?
This is exactly the type of camera he would have used, certainly, yes. I think probably by the end of the First World War it was beginning to look old-fashioned, but it certainly looks old-fashioned now.
But actually, I think it looks quite rugged. I can imagine taking this out in the field. It's not as sort of huge and unwieldy as I was expecting.
No, it's actually surprisingly light, and it's very nicely engineered. So if we can remember how to do
The camera takes standard 35mm film, and amazingly, its mechanisms still work today.
This camera doesn't have a viewfinder, interestingly enough, so the cameraman would have set up the shot by generally pointing it in that direction. If they wanted to know exactly what they'd shot, there is this little mechanism here which allows them to look right through the lens at the back of the film, and then you can see your framing. It's a bit like an
But you
old
can't have it open while you're actually filming.
Not while you're filming, no.
Okay, let's have a look.
Otherwise you let the light in. So you have to pull that up and pull the little lever down to open the...
Okay. Yeah.
And then you can focus it and frame it.
And the camera is entirely human-powered. So I just wind this
Just
handle.
wind it clockwise and you should be able to get up to a speed of 2 revolutions a second.
It's amazing, and that's just exposing all the film inside.
That's exposing the film 1 frame at a time. But you need to crank extremely smoothly, otherwise the exposure will go up and down and the speed will go up and down.
Really?
Yes. And remember, at the same time, you may be gently panning the camera around or trying to adjust the focus.
Like, so I might be sort of doing this as I'm going round.
Yes, if you're a real skilled cameraman.
That is incredible, isn't it? Of course, when you watch those pictures, they sort of stand alone. You never think about what the camera operator's doing.
No.
Using this primitive equipment, Malins is able to film life on the front line, bringing the reality of warfare to the public as they've never seen it before.